Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started, and people can join us if they need to in the next few minutes. My name is Brian Manning. I'm the Communications Manager here at Surrogacy. Thank you for joining us for our online information session for intended parents in the UK. On tonight's panel, we have Brett Griffin-Young, who's the International Outreach Associate here at Surrogacy, followed by Dean Hutchison, who's the Director of Legal Services at Surrogacy. Then we're going to hear from Colin Rogerson, who's a Solicitor Advocate at Dawson Cornwell. And then we're going to hear from Daniel, who's a Circle parent from the UK. Before we move forward, I just wanted to cover a couple of housekeeping items. As you are probably already aware, you can listen in by your phone or using your computer speakers. You should note that you're on mute, but if you have questions during the course of the webinar, you can type those into that questions panel on the right, and we'll be answering those at the end of the webinar. And I also wanted to give you a heads up that we'll be recording this webinar and we will email it to you afterwards, so don't worry about taking notes or anything like that. So without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Brett Griffin-Young, who is our International Outreach Associate.
Thank you, Brian. Good evening, everyone. Just briefly, what we're going to be covering this evening is, first of all, Circle Surrogacy's history and background. Then we're looking at gestational surrogacy versus gestational surrogacy with an egg donor, the process involved, the various programs we have, the legal work, the cost and insurance, and then obviously, as Brian just mentioned, we're hearing from Daniel with a parent's experience. Something we do offer, and we'll refer to this, is the information that we have in our free individual consultations, where you will get a lot more of a personal conversation and idea of exactly what it is Circle can do for you to help and achieve your dreams of parenthood. Each individual, each couple comes to us with a slightly different situation, so it really is just an opportunity to have that conversation and find exactly what it is that you need. Right, so without further ado, jumping ahead there. Sorry about that. First of all, about Circle Surrogacy. Actually, before I start, let me just mention I'm a parent through Circle Surrogacy myself. I'm actually based in the UK as well, and I represent Circle pretty much outside of the US. So in case you're wondering why I don't have an American accent. Okay, first of all, about Circle Surrogacy. It's one of the oldest and largest surrogacy agencies in the world. John Weltman, who is our president and founder, is recognized worldwide as an expert, really, in reproductive law, which includes surrogacy and gay parenting. John and his husband Cliff are parents themselves. Both of their boys are actually in college now, or university, as we would say here in England. John began the surrogacy legal work back in 1992, and he founded Circle in 1995. And then, as I mentioned, obviously, he is also a father through surrogacy, so he has personal experience in this. These slides have just been a bit slow, sorry. It's not responding. Oh, thank you. Did you do that, Brian? Right, why Circle Surrogacy? Well, thank you. First of all, we've got nearly 100% success rates. There's over 900 births to date. We offer an unlimited IVF program and unlimited matching, which means for both egg donor and surrogate should you need it, with no extra cost to you. International expertise, well, we've worked with intended parents from the UK, many of which, one of which you'll hear from later in this call. We work with intended parents from all backgrounds. We offer a SPA program. It's a program for HIV positive individuals, and that's run by Dr. Keatling out of Bedford Labs in Massachusetts, and she's been doing that for over 10 years now. We also place a lot of emphasis on known egg donation, and this is something that we would discuss in more detail in a consultation as to why we do that. We're also all about relationships with the surrogate, relationships with your egg donor, relationships with your agency, your IVF clinic, and so on. We're absolutely a relationship-based surrogacy agency. You get support throughout the process, and this is not just support for the intended parents, but also for the surrogate as well. And then long-term planning. Circle's a full-service agency, so we have a program coordinator department, we've got accounts departments, legal, social work, etc. And all of these different departments work together to ensure that your journey is moving forward. Right, the three components of a surrogacy journey. Number one, communication. That's with both the surrogate and with us. Trust. Trust in your surrogate and your agency to guide you through all this. And probably the most important and the most difficult is the letting go of control. Acknowledging that it's a human process involving you, a surrogate, and obviously an egg donor should you need it. So there's many different working components here, and you need to let go of that control. Right. Gestational surrogacy versus gestational surrogacy with an egg donor. So just to give you a bit of an idea, this slide's pretty self-explanatory, but gestational surrogacy on its own is where you provide all the needed biology to create the embryos. So in other words, it's usually an egg donor is one of the intended parents, and obviously the sperm donor is the other intended parent. You just require the assistance of a gestational surrogate to carry the baby for you. And we match you with the gestational surrogates that meet your legal, your psychological, and your emotional needs. The gestational surrogacy with egg donation, this is where you get to select an egg donor from our network of egg donor agencies and clinics, and then we match you with a gestational surrogate that meets your legal, psychological, and obviously emotional needs. Right, so the surrogacy process. Well, the first thing you need to do is, as I mentioned earlier, have that consultation with us. This is where we get the first opportunity to really have an in-depth conversation with you to establish exactly what it is that you need. Once you join us, you're officially welcomed into the program, and you're assigned a program coordination team. So you're assigned a case manager and a program coordinator from day one, who are your primary points of contact within Circle. Then there's the intended parent support team, and this is Circle staff, all of which who have a social work or psychology background, who you'll have a call with to initially discuss aspects of the journey and to help and support you. And they're there throughout your journey should you need them. Then your clinic choice, if you need to make a choice on the clinic. We work with various clinics, and that is, again, something that we would help intended parents from the UK in finding a clinic that works best for them. We have a good relationship with several clinics, and we will work alongside you to make sure that you are happy with the doctor that you choose. The egg donor selection, which I touched on earlier, if needed, then obviously the surrogate matching and journey coordination through the whole process right up to the birth and beyond. Right, so just going into the program coordination in a little bit more detail. As I mentioned, welcome. So that's for the intended post-gestational surrogate and donor where necessary. So once you're signed on, you're connected to a team of 2 program coordinators, a manager, and someone who will be working with you to ensure things happen in a timely fashion and help with any day-to-day issues that may arise. They'll connect you to the various parties, so insurance, your IVF clinic I mentioned, legal, and so on. The travel for your gestational surrogate and the donors, that's obviously to and from the clinics. They also manage things like payment for your gestational surrogate and your donor. And then the hospital preparation. This is quite important, and this is something that we're not that used to in the UK with the structures that we have with the NHS, but in the US with it all being private medicine. Closer to delivery, they'll reach out to the hospital to make sure that we answer any questions the hospital may have. There's no secrets here. The hospital will know that this is a surrogacy. We also have a list of standard questions for the hospital that we go over with them just to make sure that they fully understand your situation. And we share those answers with you and your surrogate. And that's just to make sure that you're all prepared and know what to expect when it comes time for the baby to arrive. Right, so surrogates. Right, one of the things that Circle really stands out with is the high standards. We're really proud of our standards at Circle. We receive hundreds of potential surrogates applying every month, and we place the standards very, very high for everyone's protection. We accept roughly 2 to 3% of all applicants who want to be surrogates. And the criteria is very strict, but really what we're looking for is women who want to help others. That needs to be their primary motivation. So this helps reduce the concern that many people have that the surrogate is only doing this for money. Just a few of the other highlighted requirements. They have to have a healthy BMI within the clinic guidelines. They need to be aged between 21 and 41 years. They have to have given birth to a healthy child. This ensures she's physically and emotionally prepared to carry a baby. There's full psychological screening done, medical approval by an IVF specialist, and will be then medically approved by your physician, whoever that might be. They have to live in a surrogate-friendly state within the United States and have the support of family and friends. This is very important, this piece of the selection, to ensure that she's well supported throughout. And then obviously she's screened for things like illegal drugs, smoking cigarettes, or use of alcohol. So our egg donors, right. Again, some of the highlighted requirements of our egg donors: they have to be aged between 20 and 29 years. They have to have a body mass index of no higher than 28 to 30, have a very healthy family history, so there's an extensive questionnaire when they apply around this, just to ensure that they have a healthy family history. No use of illegal drugs or cigarettes or alcohol abuse, and they have to have a minimum of a high school degree. Now this next slide is a screenshot of one of our roughly 340 donors that we personally have. And it's pretty self-explanatory, but just to give you an idea, you can filter down your search. So you can have a height range, age range, weight range, and so on. Ethnic background can be quite important. Location, should you wish to look for an egg donor specific location, hair color, eye color, so on and so on. There is a huge database of egg donors that is available, and we can pretty much find what you're looking for as far as your egg donor is concerned. That just gives you a bit of an idea. You can then, you'll see on the right, you're able to compare donors. You can save them, have a look at them, and again, you can save some of your favorites. You will receive a lot of help and support with this. When it comes to choosing your egg donor, you will be asked some questions around what's really important to you. You know, what are your specifics that you're looking for, and we can start guiding you and even start sending some profiles through to you for you to have a look at. This is something you can actually go and have a bit of a play with on the website. You can go and log in. I think you just need your email address, and you can have a look at some of the sample donors that are available. Right. Matching and types of egg donation. I mentioned earlier that Circle is a relationship-based agency, and we want you to have a relationship with your surrogate, but likewise, we would very much like you to have a bit of a relationship with your egg donor as well. Having said that, there are 3 different types of egg donation. First one being known donation. Now, this is something, as I said earlier, that we stand out from other egg donor agencies on, and that's, we offer you the ability to have a known egg donor. So you can meet her, you can exchange contact information, and so on. Some intended parents feel this is important for the birth story of the child. Others like to maintain a relationship with the egg donor to ensure that there is a open communication should anything change in yours or their medical history, and you just wanted to make sure you were up to date with everything. The next one is semi-known donation. So this is where egg donors and intended parents exchange demographic information and have the option to contact via Skype, telephone, or even at the clinic when they do the donation. However, there's no exchange of last names or any other identifying information. And then obviously there is the anonymous donation, which involves no contact between the egg donor and the intended parents. Having said that, our donors agree to keep us informed of all changes in their health and to provide us updated information. So if you ever needed the information, we can actually get it for you. It's just there's an anonymous donation. I do believe that moves me on to my story. So these are my 2 children and my husband. I am the gentleman in the middle picture on the left with the beard. You'll have noticed I look slightly different to the picture that Circle have on their website of me. But these are my 2 beautiful children. I'm actually a dad through both surrogacy and adoption. My son was born through the Circle surrogacy program in 2009 on New Year's Eve. And my daughter came to us through adoption when she was 8 months old. A couple of these pictures are actually taken at her 2nd birthday. So she's been with us for a while. It's quite astonishing because my children are very similar. They even look very much alike. And there's no biological connection between them whatsoever. But I have done both adoption and surrogacy in the UK. And I'm more than happy to talk after this webinar with anybody who might be interested in hearing a little bit more of my story. I won't go into too much detail because Daniel will be talking us through his experience with Circle. I know his boys are a little bit younger than mine, So he's a little bit newer to the process, and I certainly don't want to steal any of his thunder or opportunity to share his story. But like I say, I'm more than happy to talk to anybody after this call with regards to either surrogacy or adoption. And I think that's pretty much me done, Brian.
Hey everyone, I'm Dean Hutchison, and as Brian mentioned earlier, I'm the Director of Legal Services here at Circle, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, in very general terms, the legal process involved. We're working with surrogacy as well as just surrogacy in the United States. Before again, I'm just going to reiterate, if you have any questions now or during Colin's talk next or Daniel's at the end, please just type them into the side dashboard. There's an area for questions. We're not avoiding them right now. We'll get to all of them at the end, and we'll direct them at who can answer them best. So if you could do that, it would be greatly appreciated. So before I start with the legal process, I just want to go quickly through my own experience, just give you a quick background. I started working at Circle now about 12 years ago, right out of law school as a law clerk. I worked directly for Circle as well as for our president, John Weltman's legal practice. I spent about a year in that position, then took a job in the law firm where Circle used to be located. Spent about 6 years doing general litigation and legal work here in the United States, but at the same time assisting Circle with various issues throughout that 6-year period, with helping couples with contracts, with parental legal work, etc. About 4.5 years ago now, I took a position full-time in the legal department here at Circle. Circle had grown too big for its prior space, left the confines of the old law firm we were affiliated with, and set a separate space in Boston, and I took this position where I now pretty much manage the legal process of all of our intended parents in the United States, from the initial matching stage through contracts, through your legal work in the U.S., and then as well as acting as a liaison for any legal work you're doing when you get home to the U.K. Very general, we believe in a team approach here at Circle and all the different aspects of the process, whether it's your coordination team, whether it's a surrogate screening team, whether it's the different social work teams. But we have a fully staffed, really law firm legal team here as well. We have 8 attorneys on staff with well over 50 years combined experience in this field of law, as well as great experience with international couples, knowing what the law is, but introducing you to experts in your own country, much like Colin, who's going to speak after me, so that we can give you a general idea on things, but it's better to speak directly to your local counsel. So our president, John, as we said earlier, has been practicing law well over 40 years and had a niche in this area, that he had both his children through surrogacy, but I think it's 19 and 20 years ago, and really been on the forefront of this area of law. Our COO, Scott Buckley, has been with Circle the same 12-year span I've been here. And then our various other attorneys have pretty much spent their whole careers in this field of law. So we all have a very close connection to art law and parenting through surrogacy, etc. The most important law from a U.S. perspective when you're doing surrogacy is the law where the surrogate is going to deliver the child. And the reason being is that's the law where you get your parentage rights in the United States, as well as the law where the birth certificate is going to be created. And it can also have a effect on the UK process upon returning home, that sometimes affidavits are needed, or something coming from an attorney in that state to show that surrogacy is legal and practiced in that state. We only practice in states where there are no issues with surrogacy. I see the slide, there's 6 places right now that have either prohibitions or bad case law on surrogacy, and we would never match you in those states. But a couple of those states may change soon. New York has a pending bill that will legalize surrogacy that could be anywhere from a year to 2 years out. New Jersey actually passed a very strong surrogacy law that would have been positive. It was vetoed about 2 years ago, but it's expected to be brought back before the Senate and the House to be revisited. Washington, D.C. just is in the preliminary stages of accepting a new law as well, and as Washington State, where there's a ban on compensated surrogacy, also has had legislation over the last 4 years that's almost made it fully into law, but there's been some hiccups, but I think at some point in the next couple of years it will be legal there as well. What we do for all of our clients and all of our intended parents through the program is we have a specific individualized legal plan for each person with us, whether it has to do with insurance, with your citizenship issues, with your immigration needs, whatever you're exactly looking for and whatever works best for you and you're comfortable with, we're going to match you and find you a surrogate that fits those needs. The main goals in this process, we say there's really three, and that is number one, first and foremost, is securing your parentage rights. That's obviously the most important goal in a surrogacy journey, and we do that through, as I kind of just alluded to, is properly matching you in a state where surrogacy is practiced and legal and there's been no issues in those states. Working with you to draft and negotiate the contracts between you and the surrogate and you and the egg donor if one is needed to fully protect you in this process, and then helping you in managing that legal work at the end, both in the United States as well as helping you and assisting you when you return home with getting your documents and making sure you're in touch with attorneys in the UK that can assist in the process. Our second major goal, we say, is to make the pregnancy your pregnancy. And what we mean by that is, it's obviously your child that's being carried by the surrogate, but she's going to be a rather large distance away. But even with that distance, we want to make sure that your contract with the surrogate gives you certain decision-making rights through the pregnancy, decision-making rights immediately at birth, so because it is your child, and we want to make sure you have those rights. And then lastly, we want to do what we say is to limit your liabilities in the process, and that's not to bring in a fear of our litigious history here in the United States and everything we do. There's not a big lawsuit waiting for you. It's more little things like when you negotiate your contract with the surrogate, there's certain things she'll ask for in the contract, like lost wages if a doctor puts her on bed rest, or child care if she needs to go to appointments. And we just want to make sure when we're negotiating that contract that we're fully protecting you, and worst case scenario, that if the worst instance happened, you're fully protected from a contractual standpoint here. The three stages where legal team is mostly involved in the process start at the matching stage. So Brett kind of went through the surrogate screen and matching process. After the surrogate gets fully screened and is approved for the program, both by us as well as the IVF doctor you're working with, the next stage from matching is legally making sure it works. So I'm looking at two things. One is that the surrogate, her state, there's no issues with surrogacy, there's no laws against it, there's no issues in our specific county, and that we can get whatever legally needs to be done in that state for your return home and your citizenship and registration needs at home. Secondly, I'm looking exactly what you want. There's different options available. Some make it easier and some make it a little more work to do, and Colin will hit on it, but there's a difference between working with a single or a married carrier. Sometimes it's easier with a single surrogate versus a married surrogate. How the birth certificate looks, if you need biological father with surrogate or biological father and intended mother, things like that. But we're going to, before we ever match you, make sure we know exactly what you want and what you would feel most comfortable with, and match you with a surrogate in a state where we can accomplish those legal needs. After you've matched, the next stage is contracts. If you are working with a donor and a surrogate, you'll have a contract with both. If a surrogate, obviously, it's just a contract with the surrogate. And when you sign on with Circle, we represent you as your attorney from day one, so we're going to draft the contracts on behalf of you. We'll set up a time, we'll send them to you for review, set up a time to go over and make any changes you want. It'll then go out to an independent attorney who represents the surrogate and the donor if you have a donor. It's separate from Circle. Not a huge, long, drawn-out negotiation, but the egg donor contract will take a week or two to finalize. The surrogate contract, because it's a little more involved, will take a couple, or 2, 3, 4 weeks to finalize. And then the final stage is the legal work stage, both here in the United States and back home. What we're going to do is, depending on what state you're in and what type of legal work you have, we're licensed in 2 states to practice law. As many of you probably know, our system here, our federal system, there's 50 states. That's 50 different sets of laws and 50 states where you need a specific license to practice law in. So if you're in a state where we're licensed, we'll do the legal work on your behalf. If you're in a state where we're not licensed, we're introducing you to a local expert in this field of law, setting up and reviewing the documents with you, as well as just monitoring that legal work to make sure it gets done in a quick process. You should also go home and do legal work in the United Kingdom, which Colin will talk about, but there's what's called parental orders. It can't be started for a certain time period, 6 weeks, until after you get after the child's born. But there will be some documents that you need signed and some documents you need from Circle that we always assist with getting you, and also helping signatures from surrogates or donors if needed. Brett touched on a little earlier, but we have many programs available, and again, if and when you're ready and we do a private consultation, we can go over the specific ones that hit your needs. But we do offer plans with unlimited IVF through a couple of the clinics we work with. So for one set fee to that IVF doctor, you get unlimited transfers and unlimited creation of embryos until you have a live child. That coincides with Circle's own unlimited program. So Circle's fee is the same whether it takes you, one transfer, one surrogate, one egg donor to get pregnant, or if you need a rematch with a surrogate and a second donor and 10 transfers to get pregnant. You won't pay any extra money to Circle to be rematched, and you won't pay any money for certain third-party costs like the legal fees to draft and negotiate the contract for both you and on behalf of the surrogate or the donor, certain screening costs like the psychology exam, the criminal history background checks, the bankruptcy checks. You won't pay again. It's all paid through your first fee that you pay Circle. So you have this unlimited rematch. We have both gestational surrogacy, where we're finding you just a surrogate, whether you found your own donor or using a family member, or have your own embryos and can use your own biology. We obviously have gestational surrogacy with egg donation, and then we just have straight Circle egg donation. We have a separate entity here where you can, if you only need us for an egg donor, can use us as well. And then certain clinics we work with have a frozen egg program where the egg donor has already donated and the eggs are frozen there, and so the costs associated are much less because you're not paying for the medical procedure to retrieve the eggs. You're only paying to fertilize and transfer. The costs, again, much better in individualized consultation because we can specifically go to what your costs will be, but they're going to vary by program. From a gestational surrogacy to gestational surrogacy with egg donation, you're going to be in the $65,000 to $100,000 range, non-inclusive of IVF costs or the medical procedures, certain medical expenses, and insurance. So it really depends. You can go to our website. Actually, the site is right on the bottom, and kind of plug in what you think you need and get a better idea of what the overall costs are. Our cost structure on the website, as well as what we give out at consultations, our cost estimate sheet is as full of a picture as we can give of all third-party costs and all different contingencies that can occur, because we want you to be fully aware before you start the process of all the potential costs, not just our own and not just the surrogates. We're going to show you everything in those cost sheets so you can be fully prepared. Insurance, obviously a big issue in United States surrogacy. We have a very different system from most, if not all, of Europe. But again, this is going to be very individualized to what you need. We have programs where you work with a surrogate who is fully insured, and her insurance can be used not only for her costs, but sometimes the children that are actually born to her. We have programs where you purchase insurance products for the surrogate to cover her costs, and there's some states where you can even cover or purchase newborn insurance for the children from date of birth, so they're covered at all times. And it's going to depend again on what program you're in, whether you're trying for singleton or twins, but we'll make sure we come up with an individualized plan that works best for you, and we'll discuss that during a consultation. There's some small insurance you buy as well, what's called the complications package, for both the carrier and if you have a donor, just for that IVF portion of the process, the medications and the medical procedures to retrieve and transfer embryos. And then as an agency, we require all of our intended parents to purchase a life insurance product for the surrogate. It's a surrogacy-based life insurance plan, very low cost, between $400 and $600 depending on the plan you choose. And it just fully protects all the parties in case the surrogate was to pass away sometime during the pregnancy. There's usually a payout to her listed beneficiaries as well as a payout to the intended parents for losses incurred in the surrogacy. In 19 years and 950 some odd children, it's never occurred, but we do it there to protect. This page, if after today, after you've heard from all of us, if you want to do a private consultation, Circle does offer free consultations. They last anywhere from 2 to 2.5 hours. Depending how quick you want it, we do them over phone or Skype, but we also can do them in person. We're in Europe usually a different spot every month, and we will be in the UK on the next slide. I'll show you when. It consists of meeting with 2 different people. Usually there's a social work side that kind of goes more in depth on the process, and then there's a legal side that goes more in depth on the insurance, the legal aspects of the journey, and the cost structure. And it gives you a chance to ask direct questions to us that you may not be comfortable with in a group setting. So feel free to reach out. So we do have some upcoming events that I'll just touch briefly. So we have some London coffee chats with Brett in March. It looks like March 22nd. You can go to our website or email Brett directly if you'd like to schedule a time. Brett's up in Nottingham, as he said, but he's down in London a lot, meeting with couples who are both currently involved in the program as well as prospective intended parents. And we'll also be in London in April. I believe it's currently scheduled for the last weekend of April. It's not fully final yet, but it's when we do our private consultations as well as a group meeting, and we expect to be there. The only thing I didn't hit before I pass it on to Colin, one of the positives about doing surrogacy in the United States is the very strong legal acceptance as well as social acceptance here of surrogacy. Very hard to find judges and or hospitals that haven't had a surrogacy birth and dealt with surrogacy law. And the question that always gets asked, mainly because it's an issue with UK surrogacy, is what rights does a surrogate have, or what rights does she have if she changes her mind? And honestly, in the states we match you in, there's really no rights that surrogate has from the day she signs the contract, as well as enforced by the court order that establishes your rights. That surrogate has no rights, as she has no genetic connection to the child, and signs an agreement prior to getting pregnant saying she has no rights to the child. Very few and far between cases in all of U.S. surrogacy where a surrogate's tried to establish some type of rights, and where there has been bad case law, like I said earlier. We don't match surrogates in those states. So I thank you again. I hope that we'll see you either via Skype or in person someday in a private consultation. And I'll pass it on to Colin Rogerson for his portion.
Thank you, Dean. Just waiting for my, there we go. So yeah, I'm Colin Rogerson. I am a solicitor advocate at Dawson, Cornwall. I don't work with, I'm not employed by Circle, but we do a lot of cases with Circle, and we've helped a lot of the intended parents who have worked with Circle to establish their parental rights in the UK. So there are a number of legal issues to consider from an English legal perspective, particularly when you're considering international surrogacy. Some of them relate to my area of specialism, which is family law. Others relate to issues of immigration and nationality law, and wills and estate planning. One of the key issues is how do we come home with the baby? So can I get a British or an EU passport? Will my child need a visa? Wills and estate planning is something to think about. I know a lot of agencies, including Circle, will ask you to review your wills to make sure that you've made appropriate provision in your will in case anything was to go wrong during the process. And of course, you need to appoint testamentary guardians for any children that are born. One of the big issues that people face when they're coming back is ensuring that they've got recognition as legal parents of their child. And if they haven't, or at least if the other parent hasn't, how those are secured for the child as a matter of English law. I'll just go through some of the nationality and immigration issues. Different countries have different laws about who they consider to be a citizen of their own countries. In the US, a child who is born in the US is entitled to a US passport. That's one of the many reasons why the US is generally considered to be the best place to go to internationally for surrogacy, because that's not necessarily the position if you go to countries like India or Ukraine or Russia. You're not going to get a passport there. So it's often quicker to get a US passport, and to travel on that. The child may be entitled to a British passport from birth, but that depends on the marital status of the surrogate and the status of you as the intended parents, and whether you were able to pass on your nationality to the child. Generally speaking, in immigration terms, it is easier to pass on to get a British passport if you are working with a single surrogate, although it is entirely possible to work with a married surrogate in most cases and still to obtain a British passport before or after a parental order is applied for in the UK. It's a really good idea to contact an immigration lawyer before you sign the surrogacy agreement. This is because you really need to know whether your own individual circumstances are going to enable you to work with a married or a single surrogate. I'm not an immigration specialist, but I work with a firm of solicitors who are specialists in surrogacy and nationality law. I know Circle also recommend intended parents to this particular firm, but it's always a good idea to work out in advance how you're going to bring your baby home rather than facing the challenges of parenthood in a foreign country and then having to deal with visa applications and the UK passport office. It's not something that new parents want to be dealing with at any time. Wills and estate planning, as I've said, reputable surrogacy agencies will require provision to be made in wills to ensure that all parties are protected in the likely event of a death during the surrogacy process. Existing wills may need to be updated. Testamentary guardianship needs to be looked at. You need to make provision for what's to happen to the child in the event of your death during the minority of the child. In surrogacy circumstances as well, it is important to take some specialist advice from a lawyer who has experience of dealing with surrogacy, because of the way that English law operates, you need to make sure that everything is covered and everything is dealt with appropriately. Legal parentage in the UK. This is where my expertise lies. I help intended parents who are based in the UK establish their legal parentage over their children who are born as a result of surrogacy arrangements, either in the UK or overseas. You will have heard from Dean, or you've just heard from Dean, that you will, as a matter of US law, be recognised as the legal parents of your child in the state where your surrogate lives. In many cases, you will have a birth certificate which names you as the intended parents as the legal parents. Now, UK law doesn't recognise those birth certificates or those orders, and so the English court has to establish those parental rights for you. Okay, so the first thing is that a child under English law can only have two legal parents. The child's mother will be the woman who carries the child during pregnancy, and that's to say the surrogates. And that is the case regardless of whether there is a genetic link between the surrogate and the child or not. In most, nearly all surrogacy cases involving US surrogates, they are gestational surrogates, so they don't have a genetic link. And of course, in the case of heterosexual intended parents, it may be possible for the intended mother to be a full genetic mother of the child, in addition to the intended father. And so under English law, the legal mother is the woman who carries the child, and so an egg donor is not considered to be a legal parent. If a surrogate is married or in a civil partnership, then her spouse or civil partner, in most cases, will be the second legal parent of the child. If the surrogate is unmarried or isn't in a civil partnership, then the intended father, that's to say the father with the genetic link to his child, can be considered as a legal parent. But what you really need to do to secure your child's legal rights and status is to ensure that you're both, as intended parents, are recognised as the child's legal parents in England, in the UK, where presumably most of you intend to raise your child. And that is done ideally by way of a parental order. And as it says on the screen, parental orders are the bespoke orders for parents of children born through surrogacy. They vest legal parentage of the child in the commissioning parents and remove the legal parentage of the surrogate mother. In many ways, it is an adoption order that is designed for a surrogacy arrangement. They are only and exclusively available where children are born as a result of a surrogacy arrangement. There has to be artificial insemination, and there has to be, in England at least, England and Wales, a genetic link between at least one of the commissioning parents and the child. Currently, parental orders are only available to couples, although you don't need to be married. And since April 2010, they have been available to same-sex couples, whether in a civil partnership or now marriage, or even couples who aren't married or in a civil partnership, whether heterosexual or same-sex, provided that they're in an enduring family-type relationship. Both of the intended parents must be over the age of 18, and in terms of the time frame, the Act says that the application for a parental order must be made within 6 months of the childbirth. Until October last year, that was considered to be a strict, non-extendable time limit. In October, we had a pretty fundamental, groundbreaking case where the Chief Family Judge, the President of the Family Division, Sir James Mumby, heard a case and decided that you could make an application for a parental order in respect of children who were, in that case, 3 years old, because Parliament didn't give any reasons as to why they'd imposed a 6-month time limit, although he went on to say that each case would be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. And so whilst the gates have really been opened to people making applications for older children, it is still certainly ideal, and something that you should be working towards doing is to issue your application within the 6 months to avoid added legal argument. The child's home must be with the commissioning parents at the time of making the application and the parental order, which just means that you've got to be living with the child, and at least one of you must be domiciled in the United Kingdom, the Channel Islands, or the Isle of Man. If you're British and you were born in the UK and you live here now, the likelihood is that you are going to easily satisfy the domicile test. If you were born overseas, but you now live here, we would need to look at your circumstances to see whether or not you would be able to satisfy the legal requirement of domicile. Equally, if you're British and living as expats overseas, we work quite often with expats living in Hong Kong and places like that. You may still be domiciled in the UK. It all depends on where you intend to live the rest of your days. The next point is that for the parental order to be made, a surrogate, and if she's married, her spouse must unconditionally agree to the making of a parental order. That's a form that we complete and send out to your surrogate, and she just notarises that. But that consent cannot be validly given until the child is at least 6 weeks old. So there is the Act gives a cooling off period for the surrogate it's rather patronising in a way, but they don't really expect that surrogates can give their consent because of the hormones. The biggest issue that arises in surrogacy arrangements that come before the English court is the issue of commerciality and commercial payments. As some of you will know, English law relating to surrogacy is quite complicated and quite confusing. Commercial surrogacy is allowed in the UK in that you are allowed to pay a surrogate expenses and a commercial fee perfectly lawfully, but you're not allowed to pay third-party agencies based in the UK that profit from making or facilitating those arrangements. Commercial surrogacy, it's probably fair to say, is against public policy in the UK, and the Act says that you can pay reasonable expenses to the surrogate without any authorization, and that's taken to mean out-of-pocket expenses, so lost wages, maternity clothing, travel to doctors, medication, etc. would be an out-of-pocket expense. Any payments made over and above expenses must be authorized retrospectively by the court. And in most American surrogacy arrangements, there are payments that are over and above a reasonable expenses, and that's their commercial fee. And that's something that the court will look at in some detail and go through all of the payments that have been made. We have to produce copies of the trust account ledger that's held with Circle to show what payments were made and what they were for, and to identify what payments don't relate to expenses. But having gone through all of that, there's yet to be a case where the English court has refused to make a parental order because of the amount that was paid to the surrogates. And that's because the court has to work on the basis of the child's best interest being its paramount consideration. So any issues of public policy being contrary to commercial surrogacy is outweighed by the best interests of the child, who by this stage is born and living with their intended parents, and of course whose legal parents under English law at that stage are not recognised as their legal parents in the home state where the surrogate lives. One of the questions that we're frequently asked, and with good reason, is whether they need to work with an unmarried surrogate. It's a question that's asked by intended parents, and quite often the US attorneys, who are quite savvy as to the issues that can arise. In most cases, it is possible to work with a married surrogate. For the parental order purpose, it doesn't really matter. If you have a married surrogate, you just have to serve a copy of your application on her husband or her spouse, and you need her husband or her spouse's agreement in addition to the surrogates. The relevance of whether or not your surrogate is unmarried really comes down in terms of nationality law, because if you have an unmarried surrogate and you are British and the biological father is British and is able to pass on his citizenship, then you can technically get a UK passport easily from birth. If you're working with a married surrogate, then it's still possible to get a British passport even before you get a parental order, but you have to go through a registration process with the Home Office, and most people use a nationality lawyer to do that. Equally, if you are a single commissioning parent, or you're otherwise not eligible for a parental order, perhaps because you're not domiciled in the UK, and you want to be recognised as a legal parent under English law, then it is imperative that you work with an unmarried surrogate. I've just got my contact details there. I'm happy to answer any emails, any questions that you have, or I'll be hanging on after the end of this webinar to answer any questions that come through the chat. Again, I'm happy to meet with any of you in person and to go through some of the legal issues, and we offer a free initial consultation, either with myself or my supervising partner, Anne-Marie Hutchinson, who also specialises in these cases. So I will hand it back over to Brian, I think. Oh, sorry, no, to Daniel, sorry.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Colin. I'm going to pass it on to Daniel now. And again, we have had some questions. We will get to those shortly after Daniel talks.
Okay, I met with Circle initially for the first time in the summer of 2010. I met with John Weltman when he was over here in London. And I spent a few months looking at all the different agencies that were available at the time in the USA. But what really pushed me towards Circle was very much John's personal experience and the fact that he's one of the legal pioneers in surrogacy. I very much felt like I was going to be in safe hands there. So once I signed up with Circle, which was in the autumn of 2010, I was then signposted over to a legal firm in London to get some advice on UK immigration law. I'm really following on from what Collins just said, really honed for me the fact that I needed to go as a single parent. I needed to go with an unmarried surrogate. Circle then took that on board, and I was matched in the first quarter of 2011 with my surrogate, who was based in Fort Worth in Texas. I looked at a number of the IVF agencies that Circle had suggested, and in the end I decided to go with one based in Bridgeport in Connecticut. And the agency in this case provided the egg donor, and it was a very strange and surreal experience because I received the profiles of all the potential egg donors, which showed me their current and childhood photos, family history, medical history, and it very much was like catalogue shopping for the egg donor, which was quite a surreal experience. Chose the egg donor. I'd gone at the time with an unproven egg donor, which means that it was her first time donating. I decided to go with a 2 embryo transfer, and I was happy with the possibility of it resulting in twins, as you can see. We did our first transfer at the end of 2011, and unfortunately the first transfer didn't work. On speaking with the IVF clinic, with the Dr. Doyle, the consultant there, we identified that it was more likely to be an issue with the donor than it was to do with the surrogate. And at that point we decided to go with a known donor. So I decided to change the donor, and we went and found a new proven donor who'd done it many times before, and that was an anonymous donor relationship. We transferred 2 embryos again at the beginning of 2012, and as fate would have it, only one of those embryos took, and then decided to split itself in two, giving me 2 wonderful identical little mischief makers these days. I had and have a fantastic relationship with the surrogate, and I've spoken to so many people that have still got fantastic relationships with the surrogate. The matching process that Circle go through is really, really good. I've got a great relationship with Lena, who you can see there, who was the surrogate. And our relationship was very much based on trust. I really didn't want to be somebody that was perhaps overbearing or asking too many questions about what she was or wasn't doing during the pregnancy. I very much acknowledged that my part of the relationship here was to trust her to do what was best for the babies that she was carrying, and she did a fantastic job. Lena went into labour very early, actually. She went into labour at 30 weeks, and God love her, she was put on medication and was bedbound and was in labour for 4 weeks technically, until finally giving birth to the boys at 34 weeks. Lena had her own medical insurance, which Circle had checked out, but I also took out the backup insurance as well, which it turned out wasn't needed, and the vast majority of that eventually got refunded to me. The boys were born in what I can only describe as the best environment that they could have wished for. They were premature, as most twins are, and they were transferred to a specialist hospital in Fort Worth called Cook Children's. They had their own rooms, they had their own nurse. The standard of hospital care that they received in the USA was phenomenal. I was absolutely blown away, and it does put our NHS to shame in so many ways. But as I say, I was very, very fortunate that Lena's insurance covered all of that. Circle put me in touch with a local legal team in Dallas, who were really, really helpful. And they managed the process of me having my surreal experience in a Dallas court to take on all parental responsibility and manage the process of Lena the surrogate giving up any parental rights in the States. Still have a very, very good ongoing relationship with Lena. For example, me and the boys are going over to Florida for a few weeks in September, and Lena and her two girls are coming over as well, which I'm looking forward to. Colin touched on immigration and passports, and I would say that preparation is key, is vital when it comes to getting the baby home. We got Lena I was happy for Lena to be named as mother on the birth certificate, which meant the day after the boys came out of hospital, we could go and get a USA passport. The passport was actually issued within 4 hours, which I was quite impressed with. The UK passport we did apply for at the same time. However, the UK government, in its cost-cutting measures, closed the passport office in the States a while ago, so the passport has to be produced in the UK and then shipped over, which can take a while. So I went through the process of getting my UK passport application done while I was in the States, getting it acknowledged by the UK Passport Authority. They then came back to me and wanted additional information on my citizenship nationality. So I needed to make sure, and thankfully took with me birth certificates, my parents' birth certificates. So I was able to deal with those issues very, very quickly. I then got in touch with the UK Embassy over in the States. They worked with UK Passport to acknowledge the application that had been sent. They acknowledged that there were no issues they could foresee with it, and gave me that information back in an email, which I could then use to give to UK immigration when we landed back in the UK, if I needed to. I didn't need to, in all honesty. We came back, we landed in Manchester. I explained the situation to the immigration people at the desk in Manchester. They saw a copy of the legal agreement with the surrogate absolving herself of any parental rights, and the boys entered the UK on a visitor's visa for 3 months, the USA visitor's visa, on their American passports. The only proviso for me was that I needed to make sure that the boys left the UK within the 3 months on their American passport and then re-entered on their UK passports, which by that time had arrived. And we had a day trip to Dublin to achieve that. So that was relatively straightforward, but I would emphasize that it was only relatively straightforward because of the amount of prep work and making sure I had as much information with me as possible while I was over in the States. Circle have been fantastic, both before, during and after the surrogacy. I do intend on going back to get the rest of my family over the next few years, get the boys some company. I would say it's probably, out of everything I've done in life, I would say that this particular journey and experience has been the most rewarding, phenomenally more than I was expecting. The boys have changed my life, and I'm thankful to everybody involved on a daily basis. And here we are today.
Great. Thank you, Daniel, so much for sharing your experience. And thank you to Colin as well. We do have a number of questions that have come in, so we're going to get started answering those now. And if anything else occurs to you, go ahead and type those in as well. So go ahead, Dean.
How many times of the 950 odd children that have been delivered has the surrogate tried to claim parenthood? Have any of those been successful? So in our 19-year history, it's never happened. So it's a reason we do our very thorough screening. It's the reason we match you in states where if it did happen, they wouldn't be successful. But in all of the U.S. surrogacy history, probably 25 plus years now, it's probably happened maybe, just out there maybe 10 times. And of the majority of those cases is when surrogacy was what was called traditional surrogacy, and the surrogate was actually the egg donor as well. So you did have a genetic claim to the child. But in our history, it's never happened, and in most of U.S. surrogacy, it hasn't happened. With regards to multiples, can you have two different fathers? Yes, it's very common for same-sex couples to use the same egg donor, kind of do an egg retrieval, split the number in half, and each father fertilizes one set of those eggs, and then you each implant one embryo from each father, hoping for twins and hoping for two children, one of each parent. So very common, widely practiced in U.S. IVF clinics. Are there any particular states in the U.S. where surrogates can be married without the surrogate's can be married without the surrogate's husband, civil partner being the second legal parent? Yeah, I mean, the majority of them you can either do court orders prior to birth or fill out forms at the hospital where the husband's presumed parenthood is gone just by filling out the form, or with a paternity action prior to birth. There's only, just thinking offhand, there's only a couple states where if legal work isn't done prior to birth that the husband of the surrogate is presumed to be the father until a court order. So a lot of states where you can do that.
Can I just say from our perspective in the UK, it doesn't matter which state or country the surrogate's in. If the surrogate is married, unless you can show that her spouse didn't consent to the pregnancy, then her husband or spouse will be a legal parent. So you have to think about both the U.S. law and the English law if you live over here.
There's a question of how effective is a vasectomy reversal and how does IVF work in this case? I don't have a medical background. I can, if you email directly to Brett, just so we have your contact information, I can reach out to one of the IVF doctors we work with routinely to get an answer to it, and Brett can as well. So I'm not 100% sure on what the answer would be. But I know of clients that have needed to have testicular biopsies to get sperm to preserve it, and that they've been successful with fertilizing eggs with the biopsy. Can the IP get U.S. visas through the child's U.S. passport? More of a question from immigration, but yes, I know our UK clients that work with married surrogates have applied for and received UK visas to travel back to the UK, and I'm guessing the question is more of if you travel to different countries, can they get U.S. visas? I would expect so, because the child is a U.S. citizen from birth. That doesn't go away until they renounce citizenship, if they want to, until they reach the age of 14 to 18. So they should be able to also apply for U.S. visas to different countries. Can we screen to get a good character egg donor? Yes, in both semi-known and known donation, you'll have the ability to speak potentially over Skype or a phone call to meet the donor, and you can request other background checks if needed. I mean, we usually do a pretty good thorough background check as well as a psychology exam and a psychosocial analysis, but you can add things if you want to the contract, et cetera, to make, if you need specific other checks if she agrees to it. How does the money on trust arrangement work? Guessing this means the payment. So what happens for our intended parents, they pay the majority of the fee and different third-party expenses directly to Circle, and it's put directly into what's called an IOLTA trust account, which is a trust account that law firms hold to keep client money separate from operating expenses. So what happens is you fund that trust during the pregnancy. There's two different stages where you pay, and that we then send it out to third parties when it's due. You'll get monthly accounting statements showing you who's been paid on what date, etc. And then at the end, when you need this full accounting from a UK perspective for a parental order, we can print it out on one paper and send it to you, so there's a full certified accounting of the whole cost. Can the surrogate come to the UK to deliver? No, we don't allow our surrogates, or we don't have them deliver them. The main reason of utilizing U.S. surrogacy is because of the laws, etc., as well as, we don't want our surrogates traveling to deliver. And Colin can speak to it, but it may cause it more of an issue from a legal perspective on the compensation issues, etc., if she then comes to the UK and delivers in the UK.
It's yeah. I mean, I've recently had that issue arise in another case that I've been doing, and there are immigration issues for your surrogate because it's against the Home Office guidance to allow entry for a person for the purpose of being a surrogate mother to deliver a child here. So it can be problematic in bringing the surrogate over from an immigration point of view.
There's a question: if we find an egg donor here in London, should she travel to the U.S.? Yes, it's much easier if she does her donation as well as her testing here in the U.S. From a legal perspective as well as from a medical perspective. And from the Federal Drug Administration, which creates the guidelines and regulations for IVF, they do not allow you to transfer any type of genetic materials to the United States. The only thing they will allow is usually for heterosexual couples who have created embryos for their own use abroad and then have to switch to surrogacy. They have allowed those embryos to be shipped under certain circumstances, and not all clinics will ship to the United States as well. But otherwise, if you contract with a donor or you find a donor, she should be treated and do all the medical procedures here in the United States. How many gestational surrogates do you currently have on the book? So we actually don't have a database of available surrogates. All of our intended parents have some sort of waiting list depending on the program they're in. We get upwards of anywhere from 800 to 1,500 applicants a month that come to our website to start the process, and we maybe accept 15 to 20 of them based on our guidelines. We could say that we have 1,000 women a month in our database that are unscreened, but and then match you with someone that doesn't go through. But we want to make sure with the funds you're paying that we're finding surrogates that not only you want to work with, but that fit all these requirements, and we don't match you with someone that's not going to work in the end. So that's why we don't have a database of women on hand. We instead get a certain number a month to match with our intended parents. Roughly how much altogether, including medical expense, IVF insurance, on top of the $100,000? So I would say if you are using the full services with surrogacy and egg donation, again, it's dependent upon the IVF you choose and the insurance you need. Usually, on average, about $150,000. With the unlimited IVF and unlimited kind of rematching with Circle, we don't see really the giant expensive surrogacies anymore because we've capped those two costs. But when we do our consultation, depending on exactly what each intended parent needs, we give you a range, and maybe 10 to 20% more, sometimes a little less than that number, depending on potential contingencies that can occur. Are there any finance or credit options with payment that make this process more easily affordable? the only one that is currently available is only available to intended parents that either reside in the United States or have some type of property in the United States. There is a finance plan that if you have some type of collateral here in the United States, you can take advantage of. I'm not aware of anything from an international perspective at the time. Obviously we searched for that and we'll continue to search for it. But currently the only one available is for U.S. residents or couples with U.S. property. For unlimited IVF, do you always have to agree to multiple embryo transfer each cycle, or does that depend on the clinic? Actually, the two or three clinics that offer this option, this unlimited, don't distinguish between single or multiple embryo transfers. The program is available either or. You're doing single or multiple. Usually, it's only available though to couples using a donor. Or if it's a heterosexual couple, there'd have to be some type of fertility testing as well as an age limit on the intended mother or the biological mother. But no difference whether it's single or multiple on the unlimited program. Can the intended parents get U.S. citizenship through the child's U.S. citizenship? Technically, yes. I think once the child reaches 18, they are allowed to petition on either a hardship or other reasons for their close family members to become U.S. citizens. I don't know if it's ever happened and what the likelihood of success would be, but under U.S. immigration law at the moment, yes, they would have the right to petition for their parents to become U.S. citizens. If we were to start a journey now, how soon could we have the child? So depending upon the program you choose, the time frame is anywhere, I would say, as quick as 12 to as many as 20 months, depending on, there's different wait times for different programs to find a surrogate that fits what you need. If you have embryos already created and they're frozen and you're going to use those for transfer, I've had people go through the program as quick as 10, 11 months, but usually we say 12 to 15 for the fast match program and somewhere in like the 16 to 20 range for the standard match program. Is the unlimited IVF restricted by the mother's age? I believe if you're using a donor, they're all going to be in a certain age range that it's allowed. If you're using your own sperm and egg, it'll be dependent upon the clinic and you can speak directly to them. They have other packages available that are somewhat similar to the unlimited where you get a large number of transfers for one set fee, but depending on your fertility testing as well as age, they may allow you to work in the unlimited program as well. Is it possible to try for 2 children at the same time? Yes, you can do both single and multiple embryo transfers. Can you try for triplets? No, we wouldn't allow a try for triplets because it would just be a very unsafe pregnancy and an unsafe for both the babies and the surrogate. I mean, depending on your IVF clinic, though, they may implant more than 2 embryos for a success, to increase their chance of success. But we usually want to be a part of that decision because a twin pregnancy is considered high risk, but a triplet pregnancy is even tougher on both the children and the surrogate. How easy is it to get Asian egg donors? We have our own set of donors with a small percentage of Asian egg donors. We work with a couple national agencies as well that have Asian egg donors, and there's specific Asian egg donor agencies in the United States. So not very hard. You may have to go outside of Circle and work directly with a separate egg donor agency, but we can assist in finding an agency, etc. When do we pay, and can we pay in installments? Yes, so the way the system works, after you go through the consultation, there's usually 2 payments made to Circle. One when you sign on, it's about 1/3 of the cost, and then about another 1/3 of the cost after you match with the surrogate. So it just depends on which, how quick you match. And other than those payments, there'll usually be a payment directly to the IVF clinic. Usually one in between those 2 payments to Circle and one after the second payment to Circle to do the IVF process. So it is broken up in installments. I would say in our fast match program, almost the complete journey is funded probably within 6 months of signing on. In the standard match program, within 10 to 12 months, it's all paid up front. on top of that, the surrogate's payment, just so you know, she doesn't just get paid her fee if she signs with you. Her fee is kept in escrow, and it's paid out on a 9-month basis when she's pregnant. So there's certain payments you make that are still in the system if something were to happen, you need to be rematched, etc.
Okay, those are the only questions we have right now. We'll stay on the line for a few more minutes if you want to type any last-minute questions in. Otherwise, we will say good evening.
There's a question, is there any case where a surrogate mother has refused to give up the child? In Circle's history, no. In our 19-year history, it's never happened. In U.S. surrogacy history, as I said earlier, it's probably happened 5 to 10 times, maybe more for unreported cases, but in a 25-plus year history, it's not a lot. Very few times they've been successful. In the states where they have been successful, those are the states we don't work in. This will be for Colin. Colin, have there ever been any failed applications for parental orders from the U.S., and what would happen?
There's never been a failed, I mean, we've not had any failed applications. The only time that an application would really realistically fail with a U.S. surrogacy is if you're not domiciled in the UK. That's really the only reason that I can think of. But if you don't get a parental order, then there are still other orders that could be available. One of the options could be looking into adoption, but adoption is not straightforward when you're using it in a surrogacy context. Alternatively, it would depend on the marital status of your surrogate in terms of other orders. But the main issue that arises in American cases is the issue of payments, and that arises because commercial surrogacy is lawful in the US and it's practiced there. And but for those reasons, there's never been a case that has been refused on that basis. And I can tell you that Circle is one of the main agencies that the English court comes across. So there are a number of agencies that the English courts see on a regular basis, and Circle is one of them, and there's not been a problem with any of those payments at all. So.
Question, how long would the IPs need to be in the U.S. for both treatment and then the birth? The treatment itself, if you're doing the egg retrieval and leaving the sperm, probably a week. You may come a little longer. Usually you can do all the medications abroad and then come about a week prior to your expected retrieval date, and the doctors will monitor you and retrieve when they think it's best. For the birth, we tell people to be here about 2 to 4 weeks post-discharge from the hospital because it's going to depend on your baby stay. If you're able to do all the legal work pre-birth, there's not much to do post-birth other than get your U.S. passport, start the application process for the U.K. visas and passports as well. But, it also depends. If you're doing your legal work post-birth, you'll need to wait till that's done to start that other process. So we say about 2 to 4 weeks post-discharge from the hospital. Once a journey is started, will Circle Surrogacy coordinate until we get the parental rights? Yes. So we're a full-service agency. We try and coordinate the whole journey, not only for you, but for the surrogate and or the egg donor, making sure travel is set up for the surrogates and egg donors, et cetera. The only thing we won't fully coordinate is your own travel, when you're coming to the U.S., but we'll set up hospital visits and tours and things like that. Are there any special packages for intended parents, as we will not be allowed to finance for international intended parents? There's no special packages, but if there is, if you were to reach out to us after today and give us details, there may be a way to do the payments over time, but you wouldn't be totally signed on until. The reason we take kind of full payments for the surrogates, et cetera, is we want everything in an escrow account in advance of starting transfers so that if the surrogate is to get pregnant, all of her money is available for her payments, et cetera. But we can always talk about different options.
Okay, that was the last question. So if you have any other questions, feel free to email those directly to Bruce Hale. His email is up on the screen. And I just want to thank Daniel and Colin once again for joining us tonight, and thank you all for joining us as well. Again, type in any additional questions, or if you want to start schedule a consultation, feel free to email Bruce directly. Thanks a lot, and have a good night.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.